she had to resign. But then 3 days ago, Kamala Harris now announces that we're going to have a new Department of Justice task force. Guess what? To decide what's information and what's disinformation. The more you look at all of this, you realize that the people on the other side don't just have a different political philosophy. They don't just have a difference of opinion. They are genuinely evil. And I'll get back into that a little bit, but you can't negotiate with them. You can't appease them. You can't do what our current Senate does, like Mitch McConnell, when the left takes 20 paces to the left, he says, okay, let's meet in the middle, and walks 19 paces to the left. And then the Democrats move 20 more paces to the left, and Mitch McConnell says, okay, let's meet him in the middle, and moves 19 more paces to the left. And each year, our government becomes more totalitarian. Ladies and gentlemen, I call the COVID-19 lockdowns the final exam on American freedom. I always figured that at some point in our lives, FEMA would create some kind of faux emergency and declare martial law and put us all under house arrest and lock us down, not let us go to work, and not let us go to school, not let us go to church. But I figured they'd have to put a gun to our head to make us comply. But then 2 years and 3 months ago, the government just asked, and everybody did it. People stayed home even with the loss of their livelihoods, the loss of their savings, the loss of their buildings. If it meant they couldn't see their own parents or grandparents pass away in nursing homes, even if it meant they couldn't see the birth of their own children if they were a man. What more proof could a government that wishes to deprive us of our freedoms have of how absolutely cowed the American people have become, other than the fact that they just asked and almost everybody complied? There weren't riots in the streets. There weren't general uprising. Everybody just did it. And ladies and gentlemen, we must never allow that to happen again. So here's the real world, okay? Everybody that's running for high office is a Republican, and all of my opponents will say that they're for the same thing. We're all pro-life. I wear my 10-week fetus feet on my lapel, but I'm absolutely pro-life, no exceptions, from the moment of conception. And I get a lot of flack on that. I did just yesterday from some news guy. I got a call in my car on the way up here today, a man that used the F word about 400 times, telling me what an idiot I was for believing that people who get raped as a result of incest as teenagers ought to keep their kids. And I said, I've had that kind. I've got that kind. I got a young lady who was raped by an uncle at the age of 13, decided to keep the child, put herself through high school, went to college, got a master's degree. The child grew, put herself through college, got a master's degree, but that's not the point. The point is that child became a highlight of her mom's life, gave her something special, made her a more productive person, made her a whole person. You know what the guy on the phone said when I told him that story? He says, F you. You're a moron. All right. Well, if that makes me a moron, I'm pretty goddamn happy to be a moron. But here's the thing. Every aspect of our civilization, our morality, our common purpose, has all been intentionally eroded. The one thing that I'll differ with Mr. Alford on is that this stuff is not the result of Joe Biden being a senile old poop, even though he's a senile old poop. Not the result of Kamala Harris being the stupidest human being ever elected to high office, even though she is. All this stuff is a design. The open borders, and I'll digress just a minute on the open borders. I absolutely agree with Mark. I've been down there. Patty's been down there. It is so much worse than anything you see on TV, even Fox, even Newsmax, I believe intentionally disguise what's really going on. We've been there. We've seen our government, the United States of America, in cooperation with the cartels, not in conflict. You all see on TV these beleaguered Border Patrol agents chasing people through the scrub bush or pulling them out of manhole covers. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our government works with the cartels. We get down there midnight. They do this in the dark of night. We get there, they've got the buses lined up before the first person comes across the river. They know how many people they're going to get, and they know where they're going to put them. So we go down to the Rio Grande. Our government's got spotlights set up, street lights, lighting up the other side of the river. There's a guy in really a foxhole with a signal light, signals over the cartel. Cartel starts putting these people on rubber boats, all newly outfitted, new clothes, new shoes, puts them on rubber rafts, walks them across, hands them off to Customs and Border Patrol and the Texas National Guard, I might add. When the Border Patrol gets about 100 people accumulated, they have them follow up to the top of the hill like the Pied Piper. Literally open the gate to America and line up in towns and roads. Mostly unescorted minors and young adults. Right? We talked to a 9-year-old girl from Guatemala and asked her where she was going in the United States, she said New Haven, Connecticut. Now mind you, she got off a rubber boat about 5 minutes before. How can she know where she's going unless our government has been cooperating with the cartel? What I hear this morning, $250 million a week the cartels are making off of importing illegal aliens in this country. We went to a place, I call it the gate on Kong Island. This place where the walls going out both directions, the big gate in the middle of it. Once again at midnight, they turn on the lights, they open the gates, everybody comes through. The clothing, the IDs, all that stuff that Mark was talking about, our government has them discarded. Everything that would identify them in their former life gives them new clothes, new ID. We saw passports, money, cell phones, all of it discarded right in the Mexican side, and then they move over to the American side. And right across the street is the place where they outfit them. And they've got this giant warehouse with bundles of clothes, like bales of cotton, with in Spanish on women's wear, cold weather, children's wear, summer weather. And I'm down there with a guy who's a Navy SEAL. I've got a machine gun between my legs. He's got a machine gun between his legs. And the people operating this thing for the United States government were so frightening looking that the SEAL that was driving me around was afraid to go over and let me take a picture of it. I mean, these are the people that our government works with. And so, every aspect of this is so bad. But all these things, the open border, the loss of energy independence, inflation, the price of gas, the debacle in Afghanistan, the current war in Ukraine, are all not the result of incompetence, not the result of buffoonery, not the result of Joe Biden's, what's the nice way of saying it, Alzheimer's. It's the result of the culmination of a plan that's been in existence for as long as anybody in this room has been alive, and that's to create a new world order. On March 21st of this year, Joe Biden was addressing the business roundtable CEO's luncheon, and he said that this is an inflection point. The war in Ukraine, an inflection point that only comes around once every 3 or 4 generations, and we need to seize this inflection point to create a new world order. I mean, that's what all this is about. That new world order is a one-world socialist government. It's what Klaus Schwab calls the Great Reset, and that means absolute and total control of all of us on a degree that you cannot imagine. Let me give you an example of the World Health Organization. Donald Trump took us out of the World Health Organization. Joe Biden put us back in. They recently had their annual assembly. They promoted what they call the Global Pandemic Treaty, which creates an international, worldwide body to control all your lives. Joe Biden's administration, not Joe Biden, of course, because unless it's an ice cream flavor, he doesn't know what's going on. But the Biden administration insisted on amendments to the Global Pandemic Treaty, which cedes United States sovereignty to the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization is run by a guy named Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. He's a communist. He's a Stalinist. He used to run something called the Tigray People's Liberation Front in Ethiopia. How many people here remember the name Robert Mugabe, the butcher of Rhodesia, a guy that took Rhodesia from being the most wealthy country per capita in the world to a place where they've now been reduced to abject poverty and reverting to cannibalism. Tedros, wanted to make Robert Mugabe the goodwill ambassador for the World Health Organization. Well, thank God Robert Mugabe went to be his maker a couple of years ago, so we don't have to do that. And I imagine that was a pretty hot experience. But here's the thing. What in the world does the United States government, why in the world would the Joe Biden administration want us to do business with and cede power to an organization run by old communists, an organization that says that what they want to do is create what they call national and global controls of information and disinformation. Global and national controls of your right to travel. They want to create national and global digital vaccine passports, which then will control your ability to travel. And the Biden administration insisted on changes to that language to prohibit the member nations, including the United States, from vetoing or opting out of these provisions. And the worst thing yet is that part of that global pandemic treaty requires every member nation to create an enforcement authority, a police force, to enforce those rules on the people of that nation. And guess what? the Biden administration expressly made changes to that to prohibit the member nations from having control over those enforcement agencies. In other words, under this treaty, of course it can't be a treaty. You only have a treaty with a foreign nation. The World Health Organization is just what? Some kind of NGO that has dominance over the world. But Biden administration insisted that we not be able to veto or control the enforcement agencies which we create pursuant to that treaty in this country to police us and to force us to comply with their mandate. Ladies and gentlemen, if you asked me 2 years ago what I want to look in the world, I'd say for the world, leave me the heck alone. I had a nice life, I had a long career as a lawyer, been a lawyer for 37 years, but the world has chosen differently. I was going to talk a little bit about myself at the front end. I got sidetracked. Because I got to tell you, this country is so close to the end. Right now, we have an administration which, as I said at the onset, despises the Constitution, finds the Constitution to merely be an impediment to the creation of that new world order. But I never was a politician. I was an ardent anti-communist. I started making presentations against communist expansionism in 1977 with Robert Mugabe's takeover of Rhodesia. The first guy to endorse my campaign was Colonel Oliver North, because Colonel North and I have been friends for over 30 years. We put on fundraisers at our house to raise money for his criminal defense fund during the Iran-Contra deal. We put on more fundraisers for him when he was running for the Senate in Virginia in the 90s. But once again, I never thought about running for any kind of office. But then the George Floyd thing happens. And every time there's something that the left can use to create a crisis, the left uses to create a crisis. So I'll give you an example. I'm down in Texas shortly thereafter with Colonel Allen West on behalf of the president. And we're driving out to the first function. And I'm sitting in the back of the car with Colonel West. I said, "Now, Colonel, can I mention the fact that George Floyd was a career criminal?" "No, you can't say that." "Can I mention the fact that that little girl of his that hugged President Biden's leg and said, 'My daddy changed the world'?" Never met her daddy because he was in prison for a home invasion crime at the time. No, you can't do that. "Can I mention the fact that he had 3 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his blood when he died?" "No, you can't say that." "Why can't I do that, Colonel West?" "Because you're a white man, right? And because this country is so controlled by the left and by the media that it's against the law in this country to tell the truth these days, and it's against the law to stand up against the left. So I digress. I didn't go directly to college after high school. By the way, in high school I was like president of the student council, and I was captain of the wrestling team. But I was kind of a contrary young man. So I didn't go to school directly after high school. I worked. Actually, I started working when I was 15 on the riverfront in St. Louis. I was a deckhand on the riverboat when I was 16. I was an engineer on that riverboat when I was 17. I was chief engineer of that riverboat when I was 18 years old. I worked as an auto mechanic, foreign car mechanic. I painted cars. I painted customized motorcycles. I welded a little bit. I worked on farms. And eventually I went back to school. I got 3 degrees in 3 years. I had the highest average in the university I went to, which was SMU. I had the highest grade point average of anybody applying to SMU Law School that year. And so they gave me my law school education for free. And as I said, I spent the last 37 years of my life representing the rights of people that couldn't afford to hire a lawyer. People who only reason they could have their rights protected was because I worked for them on a contingency fee basis. And like I said, I had a pretty good life. But then, on June 28th of 2020, the Antifa mob, which had burned downtown St. Louis, shot 4 police officers on the night of June the 1st and killed Police Captain David Dorn when the riot kept progressing closer and closer to my neighborhood in the city of St. Louis. My wife and I just made a commitment that if they came our way, when nobody else in the country, not a government, not a citizen, not the federal government, not the state government, no one stood up to the mob. And as we said earlier tonight, when they burn and pillage and blow things up, the government, from Kamala Harris, who is bailing them out of jail so they can get out and write the next day, everybody turns a blind eye and says these are usually mostly peaceful protests. Boom! Start blowing up behind them. But anyway, we made a personal vow to ourselves that if they came our direction, we weren't going to take it sitting down. And so when the mob broke down my gate and stormed in, stormed in, hundreds of them through the gate, and we're sitting out there in the patio having dinner. The first first thing I did was I stood out in the corner of the patio and I said the two most racist, white supremacist words known in the English language. I said private property. Now, being communist, that pissed them off, and they kept storming in more and more and more. Well, Patty and my daughter, who's 30 at the time, went in to call 911, which absolutely no avail, because the police had been ordered to stand down. And I reached around the corner, and I grabbed my AR-15, and I stood out there. And then Patty realized that the police aren't going to come or help. She grabbed that dumbass little rifle pistol and showed up in the grass in front of me, waving that pistol overhead. But two of us, against the crowd of hunger, and we called them off. And that's the value of the Second Amendment. That's the value of the Constitution. And contrary to what that idiot in D.C. has to say about shooting deer in Kevlar, the Second Amendment is nothing about shooting deer in Kevlar. The Second Amendment is about the federal government not having a monopoly on power. The thing that keeps us free is that there's a couple of 100 million well-armed Americans, the government's got to think about it a little bit before they push too far. As long as we keep the federal government a little bit afraid of us, maybe they'll act less violently towards us. But you know, what the president said earlier last year, he said that if you think the Second Amendment is going to save you against the federal government, you better get some F-15s and some nukes. Yeah, imagine the president of the United States threatening the American people with nuclear war, and yet that's what he said. You know, so ladies and gentlemen, if you ever think that I'm being a little bit hyperbolic by talking about the government this way, just think about those kinds of things. Just think about the fact that we now have a Department of Justice that has a special task force to identify and track people that resist authority. I mean, how many of us are on that list? Think about the FBI that has a task force designed so that if moms or dads want to get involved in their kids' education, they can call them domestic terrorists. By the way, we have a Department of Justice who has declared that the greatest threat to the future of the United States isn't China, isn't Russia, isn't Iran, but us, white conservative Republicans, right? And you see it all the time. You see a whole bunch of these white conservative Republicans out there committing crimes and rioting and looting and smashing. I mean, I was smashing a grocery store yesterday afternoon, but I had to stop to go and do a parade. But I mean, the fact that our government says these things and nobody fights back. Think about this. When the federal government, when Joe Biden announces on television that he's created a disinformation governance board contained within a military organization called the Department of Homeland Security that's got 240,000 employees designed specifically to take our rights away from us. When he says that, where the heck is the outrage? How come they're not 50 Republican senators and every Republican congressman? How come they're not standing out there on the steps of the Capitol building screaming that we have a First Amendment in this country? We cannot have a disinformation governance board. If we allow this to happen, there's no longer a United States of America.
That's right.
All these things, the price of fuel. Think about this. Price of diesel fuel. How do you plant? How do you fertilize? How do you harvest? Everything takes diesel. Here we are in the United States of America, the breadbasket of the world, and our government is preparing us for food shortages, right? Why does the government want us to drive electric cars? Do they really think electric cars are cleaner? How is electricity generated in this country? By coal, right? You know? So Biden on the one hand says, I'm going to kill the coal industry, I'm going to kill the petroleum industry, but then I want you to drive an electric car that runs on coal, right? None of this has to do with green energy. None of this has to do with saving the planet. What this has to do is controlling people. How many people here have the rural property where they got a big tank of gas and a big tank of diesel, right? The government closes down the gas pumps. We go a little while before we're stuck in dead in the water. But if you got an electric car, and the government turns off the switch, we're ready tomorrow. Because what does the government hate? The government hates freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and freedom of movement. And that's where all this is headed. And you know what? It's going to get there unless we all stand up right now. When Patty and I were working on the Trump campaign, we were doing 7 organized rallies a day on behalf of the president. And every time I got off that Team Trump bus and addressed the crowd, Chavez said the same thing. That this is the last opportunity to save this country. This is the last opportunity to save our constitutional freedom, our God-given rights. If we don't all stand up right now, if we don't win the House and the Senate and take back the presidency, there'll never be another shot. We're not talking about 10 years or our kids or our grandkids. We're talking about the next 6 to 18 months. If we don't win this election, there won't be a United States. If we don't win this election, we are one vote in the Senate away from having that John Lewis voter rights bill become law. There'll never be another free election as long as we live. If we don't take back the Senate and the House, there's going to be a packed Supreme Court where no unconstitutional provision enforced upon us by the left will ever be ruled unconstitutional again. We'll have D.C. and Puerto Rican statehood, so there's a permanent monopoly on power in the left. Ladies and gentlemen, all these things will happen unless each and every one of us stands up right now. And you know, I call this a post-political time in America. You can't count on the government. You can't count, obviously, on big corporations because they're out there to wash us not help us. And I'll say just a little bit about my opposition in this race. Running against two six-term congressmen who in 12 years in Congress, you never saw them. You never heard their names. You never saw them do anything significant. Only after they decide to run for Senate, you see them on TV. Only after you see them run for Senate do they claim to be the best savior for your world. I've got the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, as my wife says, he'd come on TV with his clothes off and give him more exposure, right? But he has used his office to do nothing but promote himself. And by the way, when he was in the United States Senate, everybody called him the ninth Democrat. But all of a sudden, now he's running for the U.S. Senate, he's become this staunch conservative. And then, of course, you got Eric Greitens. You got Eric Greitens, who I think he's a reprehensible human being. You should actually read the testimony against him in the House Special Committee. You find out what he actually did. You'll find out that he is a very disturbed young man. But more than that, just talk policy. He was a Soros Democrat until 2016. In 2009, he bought 2 websites when he was a Democrat being courted by the left of the left at a time in his life when he was working with Soros entities and Bill Gates entities and Michael Bloomberg entities. On July 27th of 2009, he bought 2 websites, one that said Eric Greitens for Senate and one that said Eric Greitens for President, right, as a Democrat. So here's a guy who is just, as Billy Long says, ego, party of one, okay? But here's the thing. You got to realize that this is our last opportunity. And you got to send DC people that aren't just doing it because they want to move that next step up the ladder. That aren't just doing it because their lobbyists and their general consultants have the money in the back to do it. Not just doing it because billionaires are pumping millions of dollars into their campaign. And ladies and gentlemen, when a billionaire gives you millions of dollars for your campaign, it's not a gift, it's an investment because they plan on getting that back at the other end. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want change, you have to do something different. Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So ladies and gentlemen, if you like the crisis the country's in, if you like the condition of the United States today, if you like the progression towards that new world order, then vote for the traditional candidate, vote for the establishment candidate, then hold your breath and wait for change. But if you want to have something different, I'm not something different. I've already demonstrated, my wife and I, that we're willing to risk everything. Our lives, our careers, our financial status, our social status, to stand up for what's right, to stand up for the Constitution, to face down the mob. And ladies and gentlemen, when I'm in the United States Senate, I will face down that mob. I'll do everything I can to clean that swamp out, to get rid of the powers that be, to pull back the consent of the government. And I'm going to pull out for 2 more seconds. I do this everything because it's a fun, it is the core of everything we believe in. And that's the Declaration of Independence. You remember when Joe Biden tried to say this? You know, he says, well, we hold these truths to be, we know the minimum. Well, you know the thing. Well, of course, the Democrats don't know the thing. They don't believe the thing. They believe in the opposite of that thing. But here is the thing. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal. That they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, securing their just powers from the consent of the government. And that's us. And that's what the government has forgotten. that this is our country. It belongs to us. This bold experiment of freedom, the first time in the history of the world where government was created from scratch specifically for the purpose of protecting the people from the power of government, rather than giving government power to the people. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm getting the hook, but I'm going to finish with this. It's time for each and every one of us to stand up and say that we will not be sheep. We will be a free people, that we will resist, that we will not comply. We'll stand up and say we're proud